Hello, everybody. All my friends, I have to tell you, you've been with us. Oh, I'm Carol Bortman. Everyone says I never tell you who I am. It doesn't matter. But anyway, I'm Carol Bortman. And we are celebrating today because after this session today, we are half through with our curriculum. Can you believe that? So give yourself a great big hand. Because you all did it. And you're here again today. Today we have another wonderful, wonderful session, and it's going to be led by Reverend Judith Medeiros and Reverend Chad Kidd, and also, even though they're invisible, they have been with all of their pastoral people putting this session together for you. So, my friends, enjoy.
So good afternoon. And welcome to Session 6 in the Don't Be Scared, Be Prepared program. I'm Reverend Judith Medeiros of the Pastoral Ministries team, and today we're going to be speaking with you about dying with dignity. In this session, we will offer ideas and suggestions for a peaceful, dignified transition from this life to the great mystery beyond, as well as some practical suggestions for funeral planning and services here at Brooksby Village. We recognize this is a difficult topic, more heart than head, more emotion than logic. So if fear should begin to rise, take some deep breaths. It'll pass. No one is alone. We are on this journey together. And though the climb may be steep, the view from the top is magnificent. Each of you should have received a booklet entitled Transitions, an End-of-Life Resource Guide when you walked in this afternoon. If you did not, please raise your hand and someone will be sure to get one for you. We began this journey last month as we laughed at Gloria, dramatizing for us all the things we think and say to ourselves about the topic of death, summarized beautifully in the Woody Allen quote, "I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens." And I think that probably rings true for most of us, right? Those of us who work with dying patients and their families often are asked to explain what seems to be a somber and grueling choice of career. How can you do it? Isn't it depressing? The truth is that our work brings tremendous satisfaction, fulfillment, and even joy. How is that possible? Part of the answer is that we have come to recognize the parallels between being born and dying, between entering the world and leaving it. And this understanding helps us to define our function and our rewards. As people who care for the dying, we see ourselves as the counterparts of birthing coaches, birthing doulas, or midwives who assist in bringing life from the womb into the world. At the other end of life, we help to ease the transition from life through death to whatever lies beyond. I was privileged to be at the birth of both of my grandchildren. I supported my daughters as they worked to bring new life forward. I held their hands and wiped their foreheads. I whispered words of strength and comfort, and I got out of the way when they needed every ounce of concentration to move with this mysterious energy and bodily wisdom, pushing new life into the world. It's the same with death. If we can be present and love our person and help them work through what they must do to transition from this earthly life, wrestling to be birthed from this physical world, breathtaking gifts can be bestowed for them and for us. We recognize that talking about death is countercultural. We live in a society that focuses on pursuing youth and perpetuates the active denial of aging and death. We are unique in this. Most cultures bestow honor upon the elderly. They are respected and celebrated for their wisdom. Rather than youth creams to get rid of all those wrinkles, wrinkled faces are a thing of beauty. For each crease reflects the joys and the sorrows, the loves and the wisdom of life. Elders are often included in the governing circles, as their knowledge of the history of the people is vital in making decisions to move a community forward. The elderly hold the memory of our becoming, whether that is a country, a town, a tribe, or a family. When death comes and the physical body decreases so that the soul may increase, we are often frightened by the fading away of our loved ones. Those who fed, bathed, and sang to us now depend upon us for those things. With much grace and kindness, we are asked to love one another through what remains, tending to the body as it gives in and gives way, preparing a gentle path for death. It is the circle of life. It takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to guide someone to their end. Sons and daughters come by often. Grandchildren may step in to help around the house. Neighbors bring casseroles. A hospice nurse may become a dear friend. If there is a divine something, perhaps it exists in the devotion of neighbors, family, and friends who embody it. The simultaneous acceptance of letting a loved one go, and the commitment to being there and loving them through it, of bearing witness to its labor and its finality, is the stuff of legends. I recently came across a quote that reads, "Death, whether our own or others, can be a powerful gateway to complete tenderness." The short film we will watch in just a moment is a living example of this tenderness. The artist, Deirdre Scherer, captures such moments in fabric and stitches. She has felt called to witness to this time of agonizing grief and authentic love. As you will see in a moment, the museum took a risk in displaying her art installation, Holding Our Own, Embracing the End of Life. But Deirdre's passion to bring dignity, honor, and even beauty to this final stage of life we call dying surpassed the museum's and the artist's expectations in awakening people to the need to embrace dying with the same preciousness that we approach birthing. It gave people hope. So let's take a collective deep breath and grab a tissue, just in case, as we prepare to have a look at these stunning pieces of art and listen to those who came to see the exhibit. Look for the beauty, look for the tenderness, the enduring love, and know that tears are okay.
don't want to get close to death. So there's an almost talismanic fear of having some of it rub off. It takes an artist to lead the public into the subject matter, very difficult subject matter. When we hung the show, the very first comment was, "Oh my God, are you really putting that up? And what are people going to say?" It was so powerful. People collectively reeled in, I don't want to say shock, but amazement.
You can see their anguish or their sorrow.
You can see all the wrinkles in their faces. To capture that with fabric.
Yeah, fabric and stitches. I mean, when you stand back and it looks more like a painting until you get close on it.
Fear. I hate death. I hate it. We don't want to experience it and we don't want to face facts, but it's reality.
I mean, it really conveys a depressing feeling.
But all these people do have support systems, so that's one good thing.
That's what I really love about her stuff, is that even in the midst of the suffering, these genuine moments of tenderness that might not be there otherwise.
You're looking at death, but you don't feel, oh my God, she's dying. But you can feel the light, the good part of it. All the good juices are flowing out.
When does the thread of life become the thread of death? I mean, the continuity between life and death is so fragile, and that's where the tingle goes up your spine when you look at it, and then you're forced to think about the subject matter, which, as I said, I don't like to do.
See the tube coming from his chest, and he's dying. See, it's connected. Maybe that's taking his pulse or blood, and he's dying.
It's something that really, really needs to be seen by everybody, all generations, the baby boomers, because your turn is coming before you know it.
You people are getting old, not just me.
Right.
You're getting old just as fast as I'm getting older.
She makes you face reality that you don't want to face. It's heartbreaking, but I'm not afraid when I look at her work.
It's very important. I think the Buddhists speak about this a lot. To prepare yourself for the next life by thinking, by meditating on it.
I was right next to my father when he died, and it was so excruciatingly painful. On the one hand, on the other hand, I would never, ever, ever change a moment of that, and thank goodness I was there. And I think that's the way it is with all of these people in these works. They are in such pain, but yet they would not be any place but exactly where they are. It makes me a little less afraid of death, especially if I can be lucky like these people and have love around me.
We believe that these beautiful, painful pieces of art capture the exquisite possibilities of death as a gateway to complete and utter tenderness. They gently awaken us to our emotions, as many people expressed, but also help us to recognize that it is in how we approach death and dying that makes the difference in the experience of our loved ones and for us. So thank you for having the courage to look. We have a special word for the gift of love we offer during this time: vigil. To keep vigil means to be fully present to the dying person and the process of dying. Just as a family prepares for a birth by learning about what to expect, the same is true for death. For instance, families who are expecting have a to-go bag packed and ready. They think through what they are going to need, what might help them during this joyous but also difficult time. After all, birth is work. Arranging the room with things that encourage them, music that soothes them, calming aromas like lavender and special blankets and pillows for comfort puts the power of creating an environment that supports them into their hands. The same is true for dying. So let's take a look at some suggestions for creating a peaceful environment. These can be found on page 4 of your booklet. Moving the bed to a more central place, perhaps facing out the window, where your loved one can see the garden, the sky, and the birds, can make a major difference. Think about what is important and uplifting to them for the moment that they open their eyes. If they are a person of faith, religious items may bring comfort, such as beads, holy images, and spiritual texts. Family photos fill the room with memories and legacy. Surround your loved ones with some of their favorites, or pictures drawn by the grand and the great-grands to cheer them. Music helps to define who we are and can reach deep inside of us and provide a sense of well-being. Maybe Bach or jazz, singing favorite hymns, or perhaps sounds of nature playing softly in the background. Choose familiar music that your loved one enjoys. Keep distracting noises at a minimum, such as television, excess chatter, and anxious busyness. Reading to a dying person can help them to relax and put them in touch with the spiritual dimension of life. Many people want passages of scripture, the Psalms, or other spiritual material read to them. Others may prefer poetry, a favorite novel, letters they have saved, or special cards they have exchanged with loved ones. Just hearing the sing-song sound of the human voice can soothe and reassure. Create soft lighting with battery-only candles. LED, dimmable lights, or perhaps even strands of tiny blue or white lights hung to seem like stars. My granddaughter calls these fairy lights, and there is a feeling of magic in creating a space that says, something important is happening here. Like light, fragrance can alter the feeling in the room. Most people have had the experience of catching a particular aroma in the air and immediately recalling an event or an emotion. Every time I smell warm or baking cornbread, I go back to my childhood summers, spent in the hills of Appalachia with my mama and my papa, drawing water from the well, lighting the coal stove, and mixing the batter for the morning meal. The feelings of love and home come back to me in such a palpable way. So part of the vigil might include electric diffusers or scented oils. On some occasions, the dying person may prefer silence in the last hours or moments of life. No music, no readings, as these may irritate or feel disruptive as they prepare internally to die. Listening to your loved one with eyes and heart will help to guide you. We encourage you to think about adding your vigil preferences to your 5 wishes document. This was discussed last month and is available in the Pastoral Ministries office. In ages past, when dying at home was the norm, It was part of the family culture. We had people who showed us the way. We watched and were part of how family and friends modeled for us, sitting by Grandma's side, listening to her words, and the comings and the goings of the neighbors. It was normal, and we lived it together. I am sure some of you even may remember such times. But now, most of us die in the hospital or in hospice. And because we have removed that element of home-like care, we have become strangers to what was once just a natural part of living. Many of us see death acted out mainly on television or in the movies, where it's over-dramatized and designed to fit into a time slot. In real life, death isn't always just a matter of minutes or even hours. And if you've had no experience with death, it's unrealistic to expect that you would feel comfortable and competent around a dying person. We don't know what to do with our overwhelming feelings, and we don't know how to behave. So let's take a look at some things we can do to help our loved ones and to help ourselves. First, be a loving companion. The first thing you might want to remember is that you are there to help your loved one make this transition. If you approach it this way, instead of just as a passive, helpless observer, you'll be amazed at how it empowers you. Helping your loved one during this time of transition is the greatest gift you can give them and yourself. So here are some ways you might assist and offer comfort. Listen with your eyes. Be aware of nonverbal language. Watch for the frown of the brow, the clench of the fist, the pursing of the lips, the tightening of the jaw, and even the glimmer of the eyes. This can clue you into what emotions are stirring inside. Listen with your heart. Take a deep breath and give your full attention to what your loved one is saying. This is not a skill we often use because most of the time we're off in our own thoughts, already designing our response. So quiet your own mind and heart and listen actively, giving your full attention to every word, emotion, and story being expressed. One of the saddest statements dying people express is, "Nobody listens to me." There is a time to speak, but there is also a time to be quiet. It is not a time to interrupt, even if you have heard it all before, even if you will know exactly what they're going to say next. Let them say it. They need to say it more than we need to hear it. Listening says, "You matter." Listen with your spirit. If inclined, say a prayer, asking for help to listen to what is being said, putting our own feelings aside to be fully present to our loved one, and to be given any words that would bring comfort. Being present relieves loneliness. Often just being present is enough. It's not necessary to fill the time with talking and activity. Your quiet presence can be a simple and profound gift for a dying family member or friend. Touch. Continuing to touch a person who is dying is quite important. Gentle and reassuring touch helps to ease the spirit and the body. If we think back to Deirdre's artwork, so many of the images included touch. Touch often connects and helps to create intimacy. It lets a dying person know in a very direct way that someone is right there at the bedside, willing to accompany them in the process of dying. Holding hands, gently massaging hands and feet, sitting next to your loved one and letting them rest their head upon your shoulder brings great comfort. A daughter of a resident recently shared with me that she used her experience as a birth doula to guide her mom in birthing her soul from her body. She shared how she initially climbed into bed beside her mother and held her while singing some of the lullabies that she had sung to her daughter. Holding your loved one lets them know your love surpasses your fear. As they progress into the final stage of death, this will change. They will need to withdraw from the physical world, and touch may distract them and perhaps even pull them back and away from their work. But even then, light touch eases the soul's journey. Sharing memories. We all want to know that we'll be remembered. It is how we know that we will live on in our loved ones. Telling much loved stories as the family gathers, sharing favorite jokes, speaking to lessons learned or memories you will cherish benefits everyone. If you have family rituals that you treasure, remember them and talk about them and their importance in your life. Hearing is the last sense to be diminished. Even if a patient is unconscious, he or she may still be able to hear you. It's never too late to say how you feel or to talk about fond memories. And don't forget humor. If your loved one has always enjoyed humor, resist the idea that you need to be somber or solemn now. People will live and die the way they have lived. So listen to a story from the book Final Journeys, authored by hospice nurse Maggie Callahan. Casey McNamara had been quite a character all his life. A cloud of laughter like leprechaun dust followed him everywhere he went. His best friend and golf buddy of many years, Father Mullins, who was also his parish priest, was a faithful support during Casey's illness. After years of battling lung cancer, Casey was now in and out of coma and seemed to be hovering near death. His family asked Father Mullins to come to the home to say a last mass at Casey's bedside. With his heart breaking, the priest somberly celebrated the first half of the service and then began a brief homily. God, help us in our hour of need and grief. Casey has always been a good man, a wonderful husband and father, and a dear friend. He paused sadly. But then a twinkle came into his eye and he blurted out, "But not a very good golfer." There were giggles around the bed. Then Father Mullins became serious again. Help us to understand how this illness could happen to one we love so, and now is taking him away from us. At that moment, Casey opened his eyes, looked straight at his dear friend, and smiled his quirky smile. "It's the for putting up with your damn sorry jokes all these years that's put me in this condition." Then he closed his eyes and drifted back into coma. "Casey, I should have known you'd have the last laugh," said Father Mullins, as he and the family wiped away tears of laughter. Casey died peacefully a few hours later. Laughter had been his last gift to those he loved. Song. We are privileged to have a group of singers here at Brooksby Village known as Soul Song. They are part of a movement known as hospice singers. These are people who feel called to sing at the bedside of the sick and the dying. Music is so integral to who we are and can stir us to emotions and memories that we may have thought long gone. In so many ways, music is the language of the soul. The music of Soul Song and Threshold Singers, both available here on the North Shore, provides an ancient form of loving care as they stand, sing, and bear calm witness to the end of life. With open hearts, unafraid of sorrow, they show how life's final passage may also include joy and celebration. Let's listen to a hospice group in Nashville as they sing and describe how singing at the bedside comforts the dying.
When one enters hospice care, the assumption often is they're entering a sad and difficult time of their life. But a national group is working to change the minds of those who may think that way, and they're doing it one song at a time. Here's News Channel 5's Jason Lamb and photojournalist Catherine Stewart.
It's easy for anyone who finds themselves in a place like this to focus on what they've lost.
When you get to be 89 years old, you have lost a lot.
For James Regan,
that's great-grandson.
It's those days when he could easily visit his family.
This is what everything looked like when things were different.
For Jim, a few doors down,
my sons all got hole-in-ones, but I never go.
He misses those days on the golf course, forever chasing that hole-in-one.
Well, those were glory days. They were my glory days.
And for Deb, she remembers those carefree times, singing along to her favorite tunes.
I just can't remember not having a radio on or not listening to my favorite songs.
At this stage of their lives, all of them wish life could be a little simpler. And maybe with just a knock.
Knock, knock. Knock, knock.
It can be.
Hi, dear.
Nice seeing you.
Hi, Mr. Regan.
Hey there, how are you?
We're with the Threshold Choir.
The Nashville Threshold Choir
How are you doing?
has been visiting with people like James.
Good to see you.
And Jim and Deb.
Nice seeing you again.
For more than a year now.
We'd love to sing some lullabies for you if you would like that tonight.
Tammy Heinsohn started it.
Great.
After singing at the bedside of her mother 25 years ago.
It just is so moving to connect with people at this point in their lives when they don't have very much time left. And they may not have anybody else that they can connect with. And sings my soul.
For Deb, the music isn't just soothing. It's a chance for just a moment to forget about her cancer that's slowly taking over.
My Savior God to thee.
There is no pain here, just peace.
How you are loved deeply. It's very soul-stirring to me to know that I've been able to touch them, to allow them to have that emotional response.
From joy to tranquility, the Threshold Choir sees it all.
Was blind, but now I see.
Very good.
Oh, beautiful voice. Thank Thank you, sir.
And that's really the reason why Tammy and her friends keep coming back to Alive Hospice.
If you fall asleep, we consider that a standing ovation.
That's clever.
When they're here, those days that can seem so long ago come rushing back.
It just brings back old memories, particularly with Lawrence Wells.
So we pulled out the closing song from Lawrence Welk. Do you remember the closing song?
Yeah.
Even if it's just for a few minutes.
Absolutely beautiful.
It's not about what these patients have lost over the years.
Very nice.
But what they still have.
Adios. Au revoir.
We know we've made a difference for these people. And we get the chance to make kindness audible.
There we go. Good night.
Good night. That's great. Yeah, well, thank you.
With photojournalist Catherine Stewart, Jason Lamb, News Channel 5.
Very nice.
So much love flows from the singers. It fills the room. It's palpable. I want to share with you a thank you note Soul Song recently received from a family member of a Brooksby Village resident. This past Thursday, March 21st, Soul Song came to sing for my mother at Brooksby Village. The three ladies who came sang 3 songs that brought the biggest smile to my mother's face. Through these 3 songs and the rest of the afternoon, my mother's spirits were lifted, and she seemed to forget how uncomfortable she was. My brother, my wife, and myself, who were there that afternoon, spirits were also raised by the happiness Soul Song brought to my mother. My mother passed away Saturday, and we shared with our family the happiness she received from those songs. I want to thank those 3 ladies because my mother's smile that afternoon is a memory that I will carry with me the rest of my life. Thank you. Songs are written upon our hearts, and no matter what else we might lose, it seems we never lose them. Nobody teaches us about emotional self-care in a secular culture. We're all about physical health, fat, cholesterol, eat more fiber, no smoking, get more exercise, and last but of course not least, floss. But knowing what to say to someone who is dying and when to say it can be difficult. It's normal to feel anxious when talking about dying with someone who is nearing the end of their life, especially if that person is someone you love. Most of us know the hot spots in our families, and these can easily be triggered during this time. This transition period can be an opportunity for family members to make amends. We're often afraid to confront those challenges and painful issues, but courage and compassion enable us to address and heal some of our dark memories. The book, The 4 Things That Matter Most, authored by Dr. Ira Byock, an international leader in palliative care, offers some simple but profound guidelines to manage these conversations with grace with just 4 simple phrases. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. Just 11 words that carry enormous power to mend and nurture our relationships and our inner lives. Please forgive me. We free ourselves when we ask for forgiveness. When you are preparing to say a final goodbye, you may be bothered by regrets or hurtful words or actions. Resolving unsettled issues can help a dying person find peace. You could say, "I've been feeling sorry about something that happened between us. I know I had a part in it and I'd like to apologize." It's not about being right or wrong. It's about humility. After describing the incident, you may simply say, "Please, forgive me. I forgive you." Nobody's life is perfect, and there will always be regrettable memories. We're all fallible human beings, but nonetheless worthy of love and acceptance. When we come to terms with our own mistakes, we can accept and forgive others. Faced with the fact that time is short, it is possible for relationships to heal. And even though we have thought that it was way beyond hope. Thank you. Everyone benefits when we express and accept appreciation. Gratitude is one of the most powerful ways to open the heart. In gratitude, we celebrate who we are to one another and the ways in which our lives have been shaped and enriched by each other. Even as life is slipping away, even as they face ultimate loss, people can feel filled with grace and love. I love you. Love is the most powerful of human emotions, and I love you is arguably the most important sentence in any language. When death approaches, saying "I love you" is a supremely life-affirming, almost defiant act. It is a way of declaring that relationships matter. Henry David Thoreau wrote, "There is no remedy for love but to love more." Death makes us aware of the importance of the people we love and the sustaining force of love in our lives. We're all in this together. We are people who love one another and are at risk of emotional pain from losing the people we love. If there is anything critically important left unsaid, say it. Offer forgiveness, express thanks, and give love. Maggie Callahan, hospice nurse and author of the beloved book, Final Gifts, says, "We seem to have an unwritten list of antiquated niceties handed down from earlier times that sadly limit our ability to be truly caring and present during the final phase of life." Let's take a look at some of the myths found on page 8 of your booklet. Myth: dying people don't know they're dying unless somebody tells them. People react in many ways to the news of impending death of someone they love. They may feel shock, disbelief, fear, anger, sadness. Immersed in these feelings, they wonder, does he know he's dying? Should I talk to him about it? Most often, the dying person knows they are dying, but keeps these thoughts to themselves. Realizing one is dying can be both painful and confusing. When very ill patients ask, "Am I dying?" Maggie's reply is usually, "How do you feel?" what do you think is happening? If they reply, I think I'm probably going to die soon, she follows with, I think that's possible. What are your concerns? Denying a dying person the truth only prevents authentic and genuine conversation. Then, rather than creating a supportive space, we create an atmosphere of hidden feelings and untold truths, trying desperately to protect instead of comforting one another. Myth. Don't let the dying see you cry. Have you ever been overwhelmed by emotions and tried to stop yourself from crying? It takes a lot of energy. Your focus then becomes, how do I stop this? I can't let him see me like this. And that may prevent you from being with your loved one in these last precious moments. Even though it may seem just the opposite, having a stiff upper lip may send a message to the dying that you can't handle your sadness or your anger, that you're stuffing it. This in turn may make them afraid to share their own feelings or concerns, such as, I'd feel better without so much company, or I need to talk about how my family is going to manage our finances when I'm gone. When we are truly brave enough to share our feelings with the dying, that loving act gives them permission to share their feelings with us. Myth. Don't let anyone talk to the dying about what dying is like. If you've ever been pregnant or ever been around a pregnant woman, you know that one of the kindest things you can do is to listen to their fears and to answer their questions about what it's like to give birth. Now, not everyone gets pregnant, but everyone dies. How can we help our loved ones if we don't talk about it? Denying them causes them to feel isolated and lonely. The dying need these open discussions to alleviate fear of the unknown. Myth. Don't talk about what your life will be like after they're gone. Many people are deeply worried about how their dying will affect the lives of the people they love. Talking about these anxieties can relieve burden and concerns. How will my family cope without me? What will happen to my children? Are common fears. Reassure the dying that the people they leave behind will be sad, but they will care for and support one another. Remind them that their life and their memory will give their family the strength to heal. It is as normal to die as it is to be born. And yet somehow when a terminal diagnosis is made, there is often a feeling of being robbed, of a huge injustice, or of a punishment that God has put upon us. But in truth, dying is our last developmental task. No one is spared. When and how we must confront it is a mystery. The fact that we must is not. When we care for the dying, the changes in their bodies and sometimes their minds can make them look different and act strangely towards us. It all seems so tragic and abnormal. Our instinct, of course, is to stop it, to fix it, to make it normal again. And no matter what their age, saying a last goodbye to someone we love is always rife with pain and heartache. Just because it's normal doesn't make it easy. But understanding the changes can comfort us instead of being a cause for alarm. We recommend calling your clergy, one of our Brooksby Village pastoral associates, a social worker, counselor, or trusted companion, so they can accompany you and your loved one in these final hours. We have come to know and love many of the residents here at Brooksby Village, and it is our honor to be with you on this journey. On page 10 of your booklet, you will find some very specific signs of dying that can help you when your loved one approaches this final stage. We'll not be covering this today, but we encourage you to take the time to familiarize yourself with it. Dr. Byock says, at both poles of life, as we are born and as we die, we are physically dependent on others. I think that's important for us to recognize because it's very interesting that we don't consider the absolute physical dependence, vulnerability, and even incontinence of infants and toddlers as abnormal or undignified. And yet, at the end of life, we are supposedly undignified because we are once again dependent on others and even incontinent. I think we're disconnected. I think that at both places of human life, caring for one another is what we do. And that is, in fact, a part of our humanity. It's hardwired within us. So frankly, being ill, physically dependent on others at the end of life, doesn't make one undignified. It simply makes us human. Dying people communicate in wondrous but sometimes strange ways, and it takes persistence and insight to catch and decipher their messages. Unfortunately, these messages are often missed or misinterpreted, sometimes even being referred to as hallucinations. The book Final Gifts was written specifically to remedy that situation. The hospice team undertook a study that involved more than 200 cases and found that regardless of ethnicity, culture, backgrounds, type of illness, gender, or even medications, each had something to say, some message to convey. They named this phenomena nearing death awareness. And they found the messages of the dying fell into two categories. The first, describing what they were experiencing, being in the presence of someone not alive, the need to prepare for travel or for change, mentions of some place they alone could see, their knowledge of when their death would occur. Second, messages about something or someone needed so that death could be more peaceful. The desire to reconcile and requests to remove some barrier to achieving peace. As patients got closer to death, they seemed to develop a special awareness of people, places, and things. Their awareness evolved gently and gradually, as though they were drifting back and forth between life on earth and an awareness of the next. In pastoral terms, we sometimes call this the threshold, where the dying have a foot in both worlds. When dying people begin to have these experiences, they often seem preoccupied, distracted, perhaps even a little puzzled. They may ask questions, seem glassy-eyed, or appear to be looking right through us. To draw another parallel with birthing, they look the way women look in labor, busy, hardworking, and concentrating on what is happening to them. Dying people are not bothered by these experiences, but find them generally pleasant, reassuring, even comforting. However, family members and friends may be upset, believing their loved one is hallucinating, confused, or demented. Those who understand these descriptions for what they are, information about what it's like to be dying, can learn from the dying person and share in the peace and comfort the dying derive from them. Here are a couple of stories from the book, Final Gifts. Maggie was crying and hysterical about not being able to find the map. Her family did everything they could to calm her, assuring her with family photos, bringing in more and more familiar items, even going out and buying a map of the neighborhood. Finally, the chaplain suggested that Maggie might be referring to a different kind of map. Perhaps she was referring to heaven. "It's all right, Mags," her husband said. "You will find the map. You will find it. And you will find your way. We understand what is happening, and we're here for you." Maggie settled down and died peacefully the next day. George was a career Army man and retired a lieutenant colonel. His wife, Joan, was beside herself because he kept asking for his papers, his passport, and his ticket. He's just remembering past travel experiences, right? Maybe, but maybe not, the chaplain offered. During his visit with George asked, "Do you know where my ticket is? Sounds like you're going someplace. Are you going on a journey?" George nodded. "I don't have my papers." "Are you talking about a different kind of journey? Maybe about leaving here, maybe about dying?" George responded with relief. "If you're talking about that journey, you don't need a passport and tickets. Are you wondering what you need? Are you asking me what it will be like?" George nodded vigorously. "Yes." He smiled. "I have to get ready." When my own mother died, she kept telling my father she wanted to go home, and he kept trying to convince her that she was home. She became increasingly frustrated until I suggested that perhaps she was talking about a different home. My mom was telling him she was ready to go. To help you understand the communications of the dying, we have offered you some guidelines. If you turn to page 14 in your booklet, you will find them. Let's look at them together. Listen carefully to everything the dying person says. Remember that these are important messages, however vague or garbled. Remember the dying person may use images or metaphors from their life, for their work, their hobbies. Pay attention and write them down. Respond to anything you don't understand with gentle inquiries. Can you tell me what is happening? For instance, if someone says, "My mother is waiting for me," turn to that person and say, "Mother is waiting for you? I'm so glad she's come so close. Can you tell me about it?" Accept and validate what a dying person tells you. If he says, I see a wonderful place, say, that's wonderful. I see how happy it makes you. Can you tell me more? Don't argue or challenge, as that only increases the person's frustration. Remember, their experience, whatever it may be, is very real. Acknowledge it and comfort it. I recently met a family whose mom had just passed. I noted right away the 5 wishes were in their hands. Mom was amazing, they said. She knew exactly what she wanted. She decided to put herself in hospice, surprising all of us. Then she had us get all the family photos and surround her bed with them. We called the family together and we talked and we laughed and we remembered so many great stories. The staff here at Brooksby managed her pain perfectly. She wanted to be present and able to engage in conversation as long as possible. I don't know how they did it, but she was never in pain, and we had a wonderful time of closure. Mom took control. She knew how she wanted to die. She took the burden right off us, planning everything, including the funeral. All we had to do was love her. It was the best gift she could have given us. Many people believe that when we die, our time is simply up, and we see death as passive and the dying person as powerless. In fact, as we have just learned, there are many ways for the dying and their family to create a death with dignity, wholeheartedness, healing, and a sense of birthing the person from the reluctant arms of the community with grace and love into the great beyond. In this way, we gift the dying and ourselves by replacing myths with truth, passivity with engagement, fear of the unknown with choice. We can have a peaceful, love-filled, dignified death. In closing, I would like to end with a quote from Dr. Ira Byock. My ultimate goal is to catalyze some cultural maturation around the way that we care for one another and the way that we imagine the end of life to be. It's not about caring for the dying as if they're not us. It's about reclaiming the end of life for ourselves and our family and our friends and our community. Dying is a part of living. Our life doesn't end when we quote unquote are dying. In fact, it's a very valuable time of life that we must reclaim. We'd like to help when your loved one is dying. You may wish to call a chaplain or a pastoral associate. Our pastoral staff here at Brooksby Village includes a Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish associate, as well as interfaith chaplains versed in many traditions. We feel especially called to be with you and your family during this time and would be honored to accompany you on this journey of transition. Please feel free to call us at any time. We hope that you will leave here today with hope in your heart and a glimpse of new possibilities. And now I'd like to invite Reverend Chad Kidd to join us for the next portion of the program about the practical steps of funeral planning.
Thank you, Judith. So we're going to spend just a few moments now turning our presentation to the topic of funerals and funeral planning, a topic that many of you have asked us about. Now, you may have already planned your funeral, and that's great. You may be thinking about it as another item on your long to-do list. You may also be asking yourself, why should I bother? I won't be around, so who cares? Well, the funeral service is a kind of ritual. It may be connected to a particular faith tradition or no faith tradition at all. But rituals in our lives are symbolic events and activities that can help us and our families and friends to express our deepest thoughts and feelings. When we lose someone we love, grief often sends us to an unknown and emotional place. It can be unlike any other place with which we are familiar. Having people surround us with love and support during this time is so important to our hurting heart. A funeral ritual provides this, and it can help loved ones acknowledge the reality of death. And acknowledging death and experiencing the pain of loss often fills us with lots of memories. And memories are crucial in the grieving process, and they are celebrated in a well-planned funeral or memorial service. Part of our grieving process will be learning to accept that our loved one is no longer physically a part of this world, but continues, of course, to be present in our memories and in our hearts. And so that brings me to the topic of pre-planning your funeral. We've spoken a lot about dignity and autonomy, and by pre-planning your funeral, you get to have the ultimate say in what is important to you to be shared in this public remembrance. You get to have the dignity of helping shape this service of sharing memories and support for your loved ones. Pre-planning your funeral can be done at any time. And if you think about it, without pre-planning, funeral arrangements are often made at the time of death, and they're usually made by surviving family members or trusted friends. The timeline at that moment is short. Emotions are often very high, while everyone is, of course, experiencing grief. Financial concerns may be an issue at that time. Payment for funeral services is often due at the time of the service. It could be costly. Just think about it. If your loved ones or your friends, whoever's important to you in your life, simply at that moment could pull out a folder when the time comes, sit with the clergy person or with the funeral director and say, here's what has been planned. Of course, the most important reason to pre-plan your funeral is to ensure that your funeral and memorial service is an expression of the dignity of the life that you lived, and an expression of the gift of your life to those you love and to the whole community. For all of those many of you out there who have told me, I don't want to be a burden to my family, well, I've got something for you. Funeral pre-planning. Another great reason to pre-plan your funeral is that it will take some burden off your loved ones. It is not unusual for us to hear stories where family members have struggled with one another over what their loved one would have wanted for their final service. Unfortunately, stress and anxiety and fear tends to bring out the worst in people sometimes, doesn't it? And the stress and disagreement about arrangements can sometimes, unfortunately, cause divisions in the family when each person has a different idea of how to honor the loved one. And gosh, I think we've all heard those horror stories of those divisions that continue long after someone has passed away. So it's important to have a plan, to write it down, to give it to your family. Another very practical reason for pre-planning, of course, is financial. Many of you have expressed to me how you would like to have all your financial affairs in order at the time of your death, and that you would like to assume financial responsibility of your funeral. Pre-planning ensures that that will happen. On page 17 and 18 of your resource guide, you'll find a form that you can fill out that lists your plans in advance for your loved ones. It's a kind of worksheet to help get you started in thinking about what might be important to you and your loved ones. Our pastoral ministries department here at Brooksby can help you begin the process of pre-planning. The pastoral staff would be most happy for you to call and make an appointment for such a meeting. Funeral homes can also be helpful in pre-planning your funeral and all your funeral arrangements. It's highly likely that over the course of your life, you've experienced interacting with a funeral home in some capacity or another. Funeral directors can be very helpful and supportive. This is their business, so they are experts in helping you and your loved ones navigate the process well. When you're thinking about selecting a funeral home to work with, it's really important that your funeral director be flexible and open to helping you personalize your services. Personalizing your arrangements can be extremely helpful to your friends and your family as they come to celebrate the loved one's life. Some other questions about selecting a funeral director or a funeral home might be these. Is it important for the funeral home to be close to your home, to be close to Brooksby Village, close to your place of worship or the venue where your service might be held? Do you have specific religious or cultural requirements? For example, if you are Jewish, it might feel more important to you to have a Jewish funeral home to work with. Will there be a viewing, or will you need a large facility with parking? You may want to visit different funeral homes and discuss your specific needs with the director so that you can get a feel for how it is to work with them. And always feel comfortable asking for an itemized statement. The funeral home should be willing to take the time to explain everything to you, including all aspects of items and services that will be found on your bill. The funeral director will handle details such as obtaining a death certificate and appropriate burial or cremation permits on your behalf. They will contact the person officiating the service and work closely with them, such as a clergy person or other, or they will be able to recommend folks to work with. The director should offer to make arrangements with the cemetery, with florists, musicians, and anyone else involved in your service. On page 18 of your booklet, there is a list that we included from the Federal Trade Commission that affirms your rights as a consumer as they relate to working with funeral homes. A couple of other practical things to keep in mind. The first is that many religious traditions have certain customs around death and dying and funerals. For example, some religious traditions do not allow cremation, others do. Some traditions only allow certain people to be buried in their cemeteries, others are open to all. If your faith tradition customs around burial are important to you, please speak with your clergy person now so that they can inform you of what is allowed and what is not. This will help you and your family avoid any surprises. Another plug for pre-planning. Some people ask what the difference between a funeral and a memorial service is. Those words can mean different things to different people. And there are no hard and fast definitions for each. Generally, we might think of a funeral as something that happens pretty quickly after death. It might also mean that the body is present or the ashes are present at the service. Sometimes people refer to memorial services when there is no body or no ashes present. Other people think of memorial services as taking place maybe a little bit down the road after death has occurred. There are no right or wrong answers. Their services, memorial service, funeral service, can be used interchangeably. Both terms, though, have the same purpose that we've spoken of, and that is to honor and celebrate the deceased life and to comfort and support the grieving. Occasionally, I hear of people who are interested in donating their bodies to science or in a green or ecologically friendly burial options and the like. I encourage you to discuss those options with your funeral director so that they can provide you guidance. Another area related to funeral pre-planning is obituaries. Many of you have asked us, are there any tips of writing a good obituary? And my first thought about that is the beautiful poem by Linda Ellis called The Dash. Look it up online sometime, The Dash. If you think about this, usually when we see an obituary or a headstone in a cemetery, we see the date of someone's birth, the date of their death, and what's in the middle? The dash, all right? That dash is used in this poem to talk about the meat of our existence. It is everything that happened between birth and death. It represents your aliveness, your contributions to this world. That dash holds everything for you. And similar to the poem, I think it's a good exercise for us to reflect on the dash when we think about our obituaries. At its core, of course, an obituary is a notice that announces the death of someone with a description of the person's life, a list of family members. You can certainly leave the obituary writing up to a funeral home or someone on staff to write, but I'd like to suggest that you take the time to write it together with your family and loved ones as you pre-plan your arrangements. This gives you the chance to express exactly how you would like your life conveyed. Think about it this way. What do you want written about you when you have passed away many, many, many years from now? What happened in your dash that you want to share with this world as a way of honoring your life and legacy? Some questions you might ask: what and or who did you impact and change? At your core, who were you? How did you impact or change the people in your life? What were some of your major accomplishments? And think about those accomplishments in the different decades of your life, 30, 40, and on. What did you show interest in during your life? Summing up a life is an awesome responsibility, and an obituary can be interesting and compelling, especially if it focuses more on life lived, the dash part, than on the notice of death. And show rather than tell. Show characteristics in what you write rather than listing facts. Show that the person was charitable by describing some actions that happened, some examples rather than just saying he was charitable. All right? Think about it this way. For many of us, our obituary may be just about the only thing that is ever written about us in our whole life and death. Is that interesting to think about? The obituary can be the defining statement about that person for family, friends, and community. It can be saved and read for generations to come. You know, it's difficult to think about our funerals. It's hard to plan for a time we most likely don't want to think much about. But this is an opportunity to work together with your community. They can help us make memorable and meaningful funeral arrangements that will end up supporting our loved ones while also upholding our own wishes. Now, many of our Brooksby residents wish to have their services right here on campus. So I want to spend just a few moments that we have left letting you know some of the practical ins and outs of what happens when death occurs right here at Brooksby. The first thing you should know and remember about when a death occurs here at Brooksby is the policy and procedure for your apartment. We covered this in a previous session, but it's so important to check with Brooksby administration to be sure that you have filled out the authorization for entry to your unit form. You can call Brooksby, Karen Caridio in Brooksby administration to check that yours is filled out. When a death has occurred at Brooksby Village, the Pastoral Ministries Office is alerted in a number of ways, sometimes by family or resident services coordinators, by nurses or administration or security. At that time, we create a notice that will be posted in each clubhouse. You are all familiar with these notices. We are happy to include as many details on those notices as a family wishes. For instance, dates and times of your services, things like that. One thing to note, however, is we only put details on those notices that have been given to us by families. Occasionally, I'll have a resident stop in the office saying that they read certain thing in the Boston Globe, the Globe obituary, when the service was, but we didn't post it on our notice. And that's because the family did not give us that information. So we only post what the family gives us. As you know, many of our residents and their families choose to have funerals and memorial services here in our beautiful Interfaith Chapel. As you have already heard in the presentation today, the pastoral ministry staff, we're here to help you in the planning and leading of those services in any way that would be helpful to you. Just to reiterate, we highly recommend that you do some advanced funeral planning. It helps everyone know exactly what your wishes are. There is no cost for using the chapel for funerals and memorial services. However, lots of people ask us if there's a fund that they can donate to in lieu of a fee for use of the chapel. There are several funds in the Brooksby Pastoral Department as well as the Philanthropy Department. Those are all listed in your resource guide. To book the chapel for a funeral or a service, folks just need to call the pastoral department so that we can check the master Brooksby calendar to be sure that the space is free. Now, it is very important that families have talked to Brooksby and booked the rooms before any notice goes to the public. We had a circumstance recently where a family assumed that a room would be free and went ahead and put those times in the obituary in the paper. At the time of booking, we'll also ask your family for an estimate of how many outside cars might attend your service. This information helps our security department to provide the hospitality needed. Whenever it's possible, we recommend that funerals be scheduled Monday through Friday during normal business hours. Doing this helps us provide the most hospitality and support, because that's when most staff are present and can help troubleshoot anything that might come up. Now, we realize that this isn't always possible, and that's why the chapel is always equipped with an open microphone that's always on the lectern. So when a service is booked after hours on the weekends, families can be assured that there will always be sound for them. Now, there are a few other areas that we tend to get lots of questions about: musicians, instruments, catering, flowers, and caskets. The chapel has a beautiful Steinway grand piano and an Allen organ. All of those are available to any musician that you would like to bring in to use them. Catering, many families like to do some sort of a reception after the service. And as you probably know, Brooksby Village is fully equipped to accommodate memorial receptions from 15 people to 200 and above. The catering department will help you with an all-inclusive menu and packages, make some personal touches for the event as well. Flowers, it's always best to have flowers delivered on the day of the service, and they should also be removed from the chapel after a service. Caskets are permitted in the Brooksby Chapel, but they need to be brought in the side entrance and not through the front lobby entrance of McIntosh. Most of the funeral homes around here have done services at Brooksby, and they know the procedures well. We do not permit open caskets in the chapel here at Brooksby. And this is out of courtesy to all of you who live here. Since the chapel really sits in some of your living rooms, it really wouldn't be fair for a resident who perhaps lives just up the hallway for the chapel, who has to walk by the chapel every day, to have to walk by an open casket. At least in a funeral home or in a place of worship, those who encounter an open casket are expecting that they will encounter an open casket. You have taken yourself to a funeral, and you know you may experience that. A last tidbit of information for you: families might like to know that Brooksby has several guest rooms for overnight accommodations. Also, the transportation department is available to be hired as a shuttle service upon availability. Some people like to have a shuttle bus take people to an off-site burial plot or an off-site reception, or even if you ended up booking the garden room, say, across campus, the shuttle could take you back and forth from the funeral service to the reception. So this has been a lot of information shared today. I hope you'll take time to read the resource guide that we prepared for you thoroughly, and especially to share that with your family and your loved ones. There are extra copies, as there are for all of our programs. Don't Be Scared, Be Prepared, up in the pastoral office. Feel free to take extras as you need. And also know that you can refer to this guide anytime you need, rather than having to remember everything that we did. Preparing for and journeying through the end of life is such an important time. We just want you to know that we're all here for you and your loved ones in any way that can be helpful. If you would like a personal touch to helping you through this process, don't forget you can contact our Don't Be Scared, Be Prepared listening liaison, our chaplain intern, Denise Van Voren. Her information is out in the lobby as you leave today. And also as you leave, we kindly ask you to fill out your evaluation form and hand it in at the door. This is our pilot year of all these programs, and to have your feedback is so crucial for us to keep making them exactly what you need. So thanks again for coming. Have a great afternoon.